Okay, thank you, Clerk, and thank you, members. Imagine my August Falcher Rove Lig, all welcome to the 58th meeting of the Committee for Communities. We do have quorum, and I call the meeting to order. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off? Mobile tablet devices can, however, be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network, and no recordings or photographs may be taken. Can I remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate your Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablets discreetly in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and be aware of the cameras and sensitivity of microphones throughout the course of the meeting. Thank you, members. Agenda item 1 is declaration of interests, and I remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. So I would just like to flag the fact that I am taking forward a members' bill on mitigating the threat of homelessness, and I'm also a director of a member of a charity. Melissa?
I also am a member of a charity.
Andy first, sorry?
Charity trustee chair, private sector landlord and trade union member. I might as well get them all in because we tend to cross everything.
Chair, I don't know if it's on as a standing. Is it on as a standing? Okay, former role, Junior Minister. And
yep, okay, yep, thank you. Okay, members, thank you for that. Moving to agenda item 2, which apologies. Clerk, have we any apologies today?
No.
Members aware of any apologies?
Yes, Morris can't be here today. Well, he may well join via Zoom, but he's been through a long-awaited procedure there. So.
Okay. Thank you, Pam. Clerk, you've got that, yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay, members, moving on then to Chairperson's business. So firstly, members, I want to note with concern the development announced by Derry City FC joining with Crusaders FC to commence legal proceedings to challenge the exclusion of both clubs from Stage 2 of the football fund process. This is concerning development, and I suppose not entirely unexpected given concerns that have been raised in the committee. I would remind members that the committee have asked a series of questions in relation to the process that was used in this funding, and we are awaiting the response from the department in relation to that. The clerk has sought clarification from legal services to whether this announcement means the matter of active, and it is not active at this stage. So, have members any other comment they wish to make in relation to any of this? Andy?
Sure. Just can we follow up with the department? They asked if all clubs have now been provided with feedback. It's just I've been contacted by some who still haven't received feedback on their applications.
Members content to seek that? Yeah. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. I would just concur, I suppose, with your view that it's not entirely surprising, nor would I be particularly surprised if we don't hear of, or if further clubs don't go down the same route. I think today is the last day they have to do so. But I mean, I know officials, they came to us a couple of weeks ago. We weren't particularly satisfied with the answers we got and the answers that we didn't get. And they have been out engaging with clubs who clearly aren't overly impressed with what they're hearing either, if they've considered that this is the only option that they have.
Yep. Okay, thank you. And we will return, I guess, whenever the correspondence comes back from the department, and we can decide then in terms of our own next steps around that issue. So the other thing, members, that I want to welcome statements made by the Minister this week on the Disability and Work Strategy, which we had been briefed on, and Job Start. This committee has been pushing for the publication of the work strategy, and we have always thought, and I think always expressed the view, that Job Start was a good initiative and welcome this new scheme in relation to this. However, I do also need to say that I am concerned that the 12.4 million funding for Job Start has, like the other funding announcements we discussed last week, been announced to the wider public without any scrutiny by this committee, and would propose that following our letter last week to ask about budget lines for previous funding announcements, we also write to ask for specific detail in relation to where this money will come from within the existing budget lines, and I suppose the sustainability of that as well. Would members be content with that approach?
Agreed.
Yeah. Staying then on the theme of budget issues, members, are we content that the scheduled update on the departmental finance position, which is currently planned for 27th November, is timely enough, or would members prefer to request that that happens at the earliest possible opportunity? Go ahead, Sian.
I think I would prefer the earliest opportunity if we can. I think just because there are so many competing pressures and so many outstanding answers at the moment in terms of where some of those key pieces of work are sitting within that conversation around the multi-year. So if they can come earlier, I think that would be really useful.
Yeah, members content with that? Seek the earliest up. I think Andy was just indicating agreement, Andy. Yeah. Okay, members content. Clerk, you're happy enough with the detail of that? Okay, members. The only other point I wanted then to comment on in Chair's business is a report from the Simon community on childhood adversity and homelessness, and that's at page 3 of tabled papers. While the information and statistics in the report make for difficult reading, it is a stark reminder of the impact of homelessness and lack of stability from childhood into adulthood. Given the issues raised within the report, would members be content that we ask the Simon community for a briefing at a future meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, members. Moving on then to agenda item 4, members' draft minutes, which are contained at page 7 of your pack. Are members content to agree the minutes of 2nd of October as drafted? Members, thank you. Agenda item 5 then is matters arising, and you've been provided with a summary table of matters arising at page 20. Can I ask if members have any comments or issues you wish to draw out, highlight or seek briefing in relation to items 5.2 to 5.5 there, members? No. Members content as per the memo? Yeah. Thank you. Agenda item 6 is correspondence. So the correspondence item is at page 38. I now intend to consider the items by number in a single group, and then if members want to draw out or seek briefings or make comment in relation to any specific item of the correspondence, I'll ask members to do so. So first of all, can I ask in relation to 6.2 to 6.6 if there are any items within there that members want to flag or discuss? No. Yeah, Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just on that 6.3, the Marie Curie update on the Tell Us Once. I think that's really, it feels like it's a positive move. I know that we talked about this before, in terms of the death min and the admin that happens when someone passes away is just can be so debilitating for a bereaved family. So any movement that we can make and that is seen to be made towards actually having that provision here in Northern Ireland the same way that they have in GB is really, really welcome.
Members going to end?
Yeah, I completely agree. Agreed.
Okay, anything else within that block, members? Otherwise content? Thank you. Okay, moving on then to 6.7 to 6.12. So 6.7 to 6.12. So members, item 6.7 there on page 428 is a letter from the department setting out information about a statutory instrument being used in Westminster by DWP and the Scotland office because of the introduction of new social security benefits in Scotland to replace carers allowance, attendance allowance, disability living allowance and personal independence payment. The legislation will be made and laid at Westminster in the coming weeks and will include corresponding amendments to legislation here in the North. There is no assembly procedure for handling this at present, although Devolution Guidance Note 8 does indicate that the convention, and it's the same convention that the LCM process is based on, should also apply to delegated legislation. Therefore, a statutory instrument relating to a transferred matter should not be made by the British Government without first having engaged with the relevant department. So do members have any comments in relation to that before I make a proposal? And I suppose the proposal that I was thinking around this was, although there's no briefing offered in the letter, would members wish to seek a briefing from the department to see can we get a sense of that? Melissa, were you looking to say something there? No. And we could also write to the Procedures Committee after there's any plan to look at the gap in scrutiny opportunities for statutory committees in the event that departments across the water continue to amend legislation on transferred matters via statutory instrument. It just might be useful to flag that to ERC as well. Yeah.
Chair, I sit on the Committee for Procedures, as does Militia. We're looking at LCMs, so it's worthwhile at this stage highlighting to the Committee on Procedures about that, to maybe extend the LCM work into SIs then.
Thank you for that information. The other, before I come back to members on this group, there's a couple of other ones I just want to flag. One is 6.9 is invitation to the JRF event, which I'm hoping to attend. Members content with that. And also 6.10 is an offer of a briefing from a consortium of organisations, including the Women's Support Network, NI Anti-Poverty Network, Save the Children and Dr Keir Fitzpatrick in relation to their engagement work and survey around the draft anti-poverty strategy. This group has offered to brief the committee on the results of the survey. Do members wish to receive a briefing?
Absolutely.
Yep, thank you. At 6.12, there's a memo from committee for the Executive Office regarding the inquiry Mother and Baby Institutions, Magdalene Laundries and Workhouses and Redress Scheme. Because this committee has not yet responded, the TEO committee has extended the deadline for responses until next Monday, 13th of October. So before, yeah, it's within this block. So an examination of the bill highlights a number of areas where the bill intersects with the responsibilities of the department and therefore the essential scrutiny role of this committee. And the areas that have been identified by the team have been the one is the interaction with social security and benefits legislation and the importance of disregard. That includes implications for means tested benefit, housing benefit, universal credit, reciprocal arrangements, etc. So we have dealt with quite a number of those, and those are clearly relevant. 2 is provision of advice, assistance and financial guidance to survivors, which relates to clause 39. It's the essential coordination with the Department for Communities funded welfare and advice networks, a very relevant inclusion. There's equality inclusion and ongoing support for survivors. In part 2, ensuring survivors can access DFC programmes in housing, employment and social inclusion without barriers or stigma. There's the issue at point 4 of archival access, preservation and historical records management. Clauses 1.4, 16 and 36 align with DFC's responsibilities through PRONI for public records, heritage and data protection. And having worked on the Health Committee previously, that's certainly a significant issue. 5, there's a connection in relation to community impact, memorialisation and legacy programmes, and those could be post-inquiry actions, DFC's role in remembrance, heritage and reconciliation initiatives across communities, and at point 6, financial and administrative implications for the Department for Communities. You've cross-cutting cost, resource transfers and administrative impacts. So in terms of a decision, Clerk, are we coming to this later in the meeting as well for a decision, or is it at this point?
No, it's at this point, 6.16.
Okay, so I'll come back at 6.16, but for now I'll go back to members just around 6.7 to 6.12. Is there anything that members wish to raise? Yep.
It's 6.8 when we're talking about the monitoring round. I'm somewhat concerned about the impact, and this is not about kicking a minister or a department, but there's a £15 million overspend in communities at the moment, but that is minuscule compared to the overspend of health. My concern is that the monitoring round, when we're getting a presentation on money from the department, we need to ask them if they're asked to reduce spend in order to cover the overspend by health. Where are they looking to cut that back? Because there's been a lot of new programmes. Okay, they're smaller bites of money, but they all add up to a significant amount. But discretionary expenditure has already been reduced back. What further would be cut? Because I'd be keen to make sure that it's more internal efficiencies rather than external reductions in service.
There is a small part of your question that has been asked in the letter that's just issued in relation to last week's conversation around budget, but we can add to that the discretionary spend element. Okay.
Members content? We do that? Yeah. Okay, members. Otherwise content with 6.7 to 6.12 as per the memo. And so moving on to item 6.16 then, there's a draft committee response on the bill for our review and consideration. So do members have any comments on that draft response, or are you content that it's sent to the committee for the Executive Office? Yeah. Members are content, yeah? Go ahead.
Address as a member of the Executive Office.
Yeah. Can I also ask, do members wish to send the committee's response to the department, seeking an assurance that there is a dedicated resource in the department liaising with TEO in relation to the relevant sections of the bill which intersect with responsibilities given the spread of those? Are members content we do that?
Yes, please, yeah.
And members, then, you've been provided with tabled correspondence at page 44 of your papers. That's including 6.14 to 6.19. Do members have any comments in relation to any of those items in tabled? No. Okay. Members content then as per the table. Thank you. Okay, members, we do need then to set up the room for interpreters for our next item of business. So if we take a 5-minute comfort break and allow the team here to get everything set up for the next session. Thank you.
That's she live now.
Okay, thank you. So members, we're now moving into agenda item 7, which is a briefing by Deaf OAP NI on the Sign Language Bill. The briefing papers for this agenda item is at page 514. There's also a raised paper on scrutinising technology for sign language access in the North at page 518. So I now like to welcome the following representatives to the meeting. Rita Abernethy, Rita Deaf OAP NI. We have Claire McIlwraith, and Claire is also from Deaf OAP. And Bobby Bailey. Bobby is likewise from Deaf OAP NI. So Rita, I think it is yourself who is going to make a brief opening statement before we move to questions from members, please. Thank you.
I'd like to just explain the background. We set this up as a lunch club in Bangor, and it runs every 2 weeks. And it's really an opportunity for deaf people to come together, to chat. We also arrange events. We have speakers in every couple of weeks. It's a great club, really well enjoyed. The three of us are the committee. We support each other with any finance that we have, sorting out the food, events. We have a holiday we organise every year. We have a Christmas dinner. And we organise this for people. We've been running this now for 13 years ourselves. Previous to that, there was someone else who wasn't deaf who was running like a lunch thing, but we have been running it now for 13 years. Everybody who runs this group is deaf, so we're all deaf ourselves.
Thank you. Okay, so we're very keen to hear about the specific issues and the specific perspective and challenges relating to this bill and the challenges for deaf older people. So we very much appreciate your attendance at committee today.
Can I just start off, Bobby, saying by adding something? I think I have so many concerns because, we have a lot of friends who are deaf, who are getting elderly, moving on in age, and, I go out and visit friends, as we all do. And we're going out into the care home sector, nursing homes, care homes, and we will go in and meet people. They'll sort of, when we ask them how they are, they'll say, always, I'm okay, but I'm really lonely. I'm really lonely. And a lot, there's dementia appearing in older years. But staff in those settings have no communication skills. So all they're getting is notes written down and passed to them. Now, for anybody in life at that stage, do you want all your communication to be written down and given to you in notes? We've got a thriving deaf community who use British Sign Language, but those people are stuck in care homes, and it's a real concern for us that there's just no provision. Rita's just saying, it would be fantastic to have a Deaf OAP home or unit within a home where you would have staff who have sign language skills, deaf staff who could work there. And it would mean that people's mental health would be helped, because if they go into those homes, they're just thrown in and left to decline because they're so isolated and so lonely. There's nothing for them.
Yeah, that's
and can I, Claire, say, the thing is, the staff don't have training in sign language, and that should be a given. It should be a prerequisite. So they're going out and mouthing away at people, but when you're deaf and you can't hear, you just don't know what's being said, and it's very worrying. Bobby again. In terms of staff, yeah, it's fine for them to learn sign language, but sign language is a language and you can't pick it up in a couple of sessions. So they would need to have intermediate level skills at least. So you're talking about, people can learn basic level qualifications called level 1 and 2, but you need way more than that to have effective communication, especially with somebody who's older whose communication is changing. And so that's why, people then do a wee course and they think, but can you imagine from your learning of language, a wee course doesn't give you much. And then these are older people whose language is changing, who are very isolated, and that's as much as they get. So we need to have either staff with lots of sign language training or deaf staff going in. Rita's saying it would be fantastic to have, if somebody's in a permanent setting, staff going in. I understand staff have to start somewhere, but I think the whole approach needs to be addressed in terms of who can work with deaf people and how that could be supported. Bobby's absolutely right. Just having a few signs doesn't give you fluent communication with someone who's been deaf all their life. Claire again. My husband, who's sadly now not with us anymore, had a stroke and ended up in hospital for 8 months, or in a care home for 8 months. No communication until I went in, ever. There was a consultant said that they wanted him to go into the care home, and I refused. I absolutely refused. Ended up in a major meeting where I just refused, and it was very distressing for me. So in the end, I brought him home with me. I had to do, I'm only a tiny woman, my husband wasn't tiny, and we had to get a hoist and try and get him lifted. He stayed with me for 27 years at home because I wouldn't let him go into one of those places, because I know what it's like for deaf people, because we've seen our friends go in, they just decline from the day they go in. So I kept him with me for 27 years and I did everything for him. He passed away 5 years ago now. Rita's saying, the other suggestion I would have is that deaf people are going to be isolated like that in that sector. There should be staff employed who are peripatetic, who go around, visit all these homes and bring stimulation to people. And that's something that you could absolutely pay a deaf person to do, to go out, meet with people, give them that chat, give them that conversation and bring them into what's going on. Moving on, another issue I'd like to raise is the PA scheme for older people. I mean, I can remember during COVID, my husband and I applied to the Department for Communities for some funding for us to do a PA type role and to set up a device for remote technology for deaf people, because during COVID deaf people were even more isolated than everybody else was when they were stuck at home. So we got funding, and we knew a lot of different deaf people who had time and availability, and we sorted out the funding for them to go out as PA, visit people, set up this equipment and do all that stuff. We ran that for 2 years. It worked really well. Obviously funding then stopped and weren't able to do that again, but I've always thought, it worked so well. If you have a good scheme in place, there's deaf people out there who could do that. They can travel around, visit people at home, take them out for a cuppa, do all those things, take them out to museums, take them out to parks. But deaf people have the ability to do that for other deaf people, but there needs to be some proper system in place to enable that. And across the water, if you look at what's going on in England, there's a very, very thriving system of PAs who are employed to do that. I have heard that people who are visually impaired have PAs, but I don't understand why deaf people don't get that. Because for so many deaf people as well, there are job opportunities here that we know there's lots of people could jump at. So they don't have the employment opportunities other people have in society.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's a very passionate setting out of a number of very specific problems, which is really, really useful to hear. And a particular perspective that hasn't been kind of maybe received the focus that you're bringing to it today. You mentioned during your contribution around the changing communication as people get older. Can you tell us a bit about what that is and how that impacts?
I can indeed. So language changes between the generations. A lot of our younger deaf people had to go to school in England. So they were educated in England, so their signing is slightly different. Also, we have deaf people who travel down to Dublin in the south to be educated. So we have signs that are a different language. It's not that the language is different, but older people maybe will not understand the sign language that younger generation are using, because they're bringing signs in, and they're because they've travelled, their signing is slightly different. And that's why within our lunch club, we're all older people. We are all using, we would see it as a very rich form of sign. It's very native to here where we're from. It uses a lot of finger spelling, it uses a lot of body language, it uses a lot of facial expression that other generations don't have. And a lot of us went to school in Jordanstown. Some people went to school in Dublin. But because of our generation, because we've known each other, we know each other's life experience, we just have a language where we can communicate so instantly and easily. We're from all different religions, and that's okay. As a deaf community, there's something very strong that bonds us. And I know that we're really the only club like this that exists in the whole of Northern Ireland, and it's a really, really key service for those deaf people who attend our club.
Thank you. The other question that I wanted to ask, you'd mentioned that in relation to Clause 2, there are other approaches over and above the provision of sign language classes that could be used to ensure greater use of sign language. Can you tell us a bit more about what these other approaches might be?
Yes, absolutely. Really, this causes me to think ahead. And I think what we really need to see is sign language being taught in schools. I think that's really important. There are a number of schools who do run shorter courses, and I think being able to teach our young people of tomorrow's sign language will make huge headway. I know over in England, there are schools that provide sign language to children in schools, and it's brilliant. The difference that can make is huge. I would love to see that more formalised here. I do believe that we need to make sure that we are teaching those in nursing homes sign language. They should all have basic communication skills. And we don't wait for a deaf person to move into a home. What we need to do is make sure that we are preparing, and we're making sure that these care homes are ready. If it's maybe more in the western area, you'd focus more on ISL, and if it's more in this area, you'd focus more on BSL. And I think it's really important that we're respecting deaf people and their language of choice. Whenever we talk about English and accessing English, I mean, you have to really consider that for us, English is very much a second language. And therefore, if you're older, communicating in your second language, writing things down is just not appropriate. And the problem is deaf people maybe won't be very vocal, and they won't necessarily complain, and therefore everybody thinks they're okay, but actually what's happening is our deaf people are just declining in these homes. And I know very often, because sign language is my first language, and whenever I'm trying to write things down, I can't express myself in the same way that I can in sign language, and also I'm getting older too, and we have to think about those people who are much older. A lot of our older generation would use a lot of finger spelling. That would be incorporated in the language. And what's really important then is that that's honoured, and that we're using and learning the language of the people who will be in these settings and our older generation.
Okay, thank you. And it actually reminds me of what has struck me often around the need for social workers, for example, to be able to communicate in sign. When I was working as a social worker, I tried to take up some classes locally, but they were oversubscribed, I think underlining the lack of provision in a sense. But thank you for that so far. I'm going to go to other members' questions now. I'm going firstly to Pam, Cameron, then I have Kelly.
Sorry, Chair, could I just when you're saying that and you're talking about social workers, where I live, I am in the Northern Trust, and we have no social workers who can sign at all. I was in Mossley Mill recently, just last week actually, there for a meeting, and we had a number of deaf people, we had social workers there, and actually I don't even think we have sensory support social workers now in the Northern Trust. We do have people who will be able to provide equipment, but we have no social workers for the deaf at all in the Northern Trust, whatever way the system has changed. So if I needed a social worker for the deaf, I couldn't get one. I know that Cookstown has a very strong service. I'm not sure about the Northwest. I know Belfast is an excellent service for deaf people. But why then do you go into another trust and it's a completely different system whereby I could not have a social worker for the deaf if I needed one? And sorry, can I interrupt there also? I'm in Lisburn. I'm from and live in Lisburn. And a social worker came out to my house and didn't know who she was, and she was speaking to me. And I said, I'm deaf, I use sign language. And she said, oh, well, I can't sign. And I said, well, thank you, but I'll not be needing your services if you can't communicate with me. So it's just interesting that this is a social worker who works in the sensory support team that can't sign. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. How do you get into a job like this and there's no requisite to learn sign language? But really, as a deaf community, we need to be honoured. Our language needs to be honoured. And if somebody's going to be working with us, there needs to be provision made. And that needs to be thought of. And whenever you're looking at criteria, sign language should be in the criteria to be able to work with deaf people, if you're going to work with deaf people. I think so, absolutely. And I think if it should be part of the criteria, essential criteria for anybody who's working with the deaf community. Because this is the case. A lot of people working in the public sector for us don't know anything about sign language, and it really doesn't make sense.
Excellently made point. Thank you. Pam, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for your attendance here at committee. Rita in particular, you're my constituent. Lovely to see you. I am fresh and new to this communities committee, but I'm really delighted to be here and to be here to witness the scrutiny of the sign language bill, which is of such great importance. I mean, I've worked with you and your family and your friends over years, as did my constituency office, and we know how challenging that is. And I thank you and your good husband for your patience in how you deal with communicating with us, because I know that is a real challenge, but because we don't have that talent to communicate in your specific language of need. So I think going forward, I'm very excited to see this piece of legislation in a country where language is often seen as very controversial. I think this is the absolute greatest need for Northern Ireland to bring this bill forward and ensure that we have provision going into the future. Obviously, we understand that that will not happen overnight. It will be hugely challenging. We know how vital the services are of these wonderful interpreters, and we understand how challenging that is for them, and how there's huge burnout in what is a very intensive work. So I suppose my initial question to you would be really if you could, for me, outline what you see as the key challenges that we need to be looking at and concentrating on while scrutinising this bill, and if you have any ideas around how we deal with the short, medium and long term actions in terms of skilling up our people in terms of learning sign language. How best can we go about that, or what else could go into the bill to ensure that we make the best possible use of this piece of legislation for you as the deaf community? Thank you.
Okay. Really, communication is at the heart of all of this. Communication is so important for us as a deaf community. Without communication, we are completely isolated and we face complete barriers. If we have sign language and have the ability to communicate in sign language, we have access and we can live our lives like anybody else. So I would just say, we're looking at that, it really is communication that's key. For example, whenever we're looking at going out and interacting with people, a lot of them don't have sign language, and I've given you the example of social services or social workers, or even the fact that we don't have social workers. So we need those support structures in place to be able to let us live our lives. I mean, how can we access a service if the service can't communicate with us? And funny, I remember whenever I had my first daughter, I had a social worker came out to the house who could sign. Now my children are gone a long time ago, they're big and they've left, but for some reason now we don't even have social workers, so in some ways we're seeing a regression despite time moving on. And up in Mossley Mill, the mayor can sign, and I think because she's got a deaf niece, so then she went to learn sign language, and just being able to communicate with people that we're meeting like that makes such a difference to us in our lives.
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Kelly?
Thank you so much for coming along today. For me, as a person with hearing loss, it's very important as I get older that others understand how difficult life can be. I want to take you back to the bill. In the bill, it talks about using sign language and the importance of having classes. But it only talks about classes being provided for children, which is important. Do you think we should amend this bill to ensure that older people have access to sign language classes too?
You mean older deaf people or people who aren't deaf?
It could be older deaf people or people who are losing their hearing.
I think when people are losing their hearing, there could well be a benefit in learning sign language. There could indeed, because it could just get to the point where they've no residual hearing at all. And therefore, people need to learn how to access interpreting services, because that can transform access to life. So yes, I can see that, totally. Bobby's just saying there. There's a girl I know over in England. Her name's Rosie. Do you remember Rosie Ellis, who was on Strictly Come Dancing? Rose Ellis. And I know that because of her, there was a TV programme where she went in and taught some older people sign language. I don't know if you saw that. And at the end, there was one of the people came up and did their best using the sign language that they'd learned. And I think it was very emotional for everybody watching that, seeing the liberation it brought to them. And I thought Rose did a fantastic job there in bringing that into that sector. I can give you another example. So I had a teacher, I was a sign language teacher, and I used to go into the QUB medical school and teach their students. I did that, once they got to about the third year, they would go in, medical students, some of them, and do a sign language module. And there was a story came out of that of a deaf mother who had struggled to get hold of an interpreter because their child needed to go into hospital in the middle of the night, didn't know what to do, arrived at the emergency department in a panic, obviously, and a doctor came out who had just a few bits of sign language, a few signs, and that deaf mother said that she just was so relieved, so delighted that somebody met her who could at least say hello, how are you, and make that effort to communicate face to face with her. And she gave me the feedback that for medical students it was crucial. Rita's saying, yes, I know of someone else who, and I think when we look at the residents in these care homes or nursing homes, they could be helping to teach the residents around them, potentially. I think there's some things here that could be looked at and addressed.
Thank you. My next question is about those residential care homes. In this bill, it talks about types of organisations that deliver public services, services of public character. Some of the residential care homes are not run by government, they're private. They would be outside of the requirements of this bill.
Yeah, we know that. That's not helpful.
So they're outside of the bill because they're not mentioned. It's only talking about those residential places that provide public services that are provided by the health trusts. So do you think that we need to ensure that where any organisation is providing a
100%.
public character?
Of course, absolutely. Yeah. If you're going to have a law, we as residents here in Northern Ireland want to know that we're going to have access to communication. It shouldn't be up to us to know whether or not where we're going is a government-based service.
So it's important then for us to include hairdressers, retailers, homes, anywhere that people have interaction?
No, nowadays you get a wee thank you sign when you go in places, but that's the only sign we will ever see, is the sign for thank you, which is the one that people have picked up on.
So when we're
Nothing else.
talking about organisations taking reasonable steps, it's all organisations that you come into contact with, not just government-led organisations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally. I mean, I would have thought that was a given. Do you know, we live in Northern Ireland. If it's going to be a law, then why are we being refused? And I think that would have to apply to, for example, folds. You know, the whole fold system. When you go in as a deaf person, and we know there's plenty of deaf people out there living in folds right now, do they have access or not? And I think what we need to think about is that the fold system is lovely, but if there was a fire alarm and there was an emergency, that deaf person could be trapped in the room. How do they have an emergency evacuation system that is appropriate for deaf people? Do the staff know how to communicate with the deaf resident in an emergency? All of that. Claire's saying they should have a flashing light in their room, but we don't know. You see, that's the thing. We're sitting here not knowing the answers. It's fairly serious.
My final question is about deaf culture. In this piece of legislation, it proposes that deaf culture is limited to sign language, but we know from hearing about your lunch club that it's more about other things than just the communication. It's about life, it's about families, it's about what you enjoy doing. Should we include more protection for deaf culture in this legislation?
Absolutely. It's who we are. It's what we're doing, yes. Bobby's just adding in. I think as well that when we meet for our lunch clubs in Bangor, people come in and they don't stop from the minute they arrive chatting. You will watch this vibrant conversation going on. We sort of have to stop it to try and get them to eat their lunch, because the lunch is sitting there. Because you can see the hunger and the desperation there is to be together. Rita said, like, trying to get them out of the building in time is a nightmare, because we have a security man who's constantly trying to get us out, but I can't get them out the door because it's just people's chance to chat.
It sounds wonderful. You've given us fantastic insight today that we haven't heard before. Thank you so much. That's really, really helpful.
Thank you, Kelly.
Can I just add in that just last week, I was just looking around the room. I organised the whole thing, and there was a seat where there's usually a lady who comes to our group. She's in a wheelchair, that's nothing to do with the fact she is deaf, and she wasn't there. And usually she would let me know, because, we run this every second week and she knows it's always on. I was a wee bit concerned about her. And everybody then got a wee bit concerned because she's always there. So when I get home, I gave her a call, obviously a video call, and just asked, was she all right? And she said, yeah, fine, what's wrong? And I said, but you missed lunch club today. And she was so upset. She had been doing something in her garden, forgot, and she kept saying to me, oh, Rita, that's awful, I've missed it, I'm so devastated. What were you doing? Tell me all about it, because that's the highlight of her life. But she just hadn't made it that week. And that's how important it is. And for everybody, it is just their key thing that they look forward to from session to session. Can I just say, we don't have the capacity or the resources. I have to limit to 30 people. There's almost a waiting list. We've got a room. We run this ourselves, sometimes volunteers. You're almost waiting for somebody to die before I can bring other people in. I've only so much capacity to do this. There's more people out there who could benefit from it.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Melissa, go ahead.
You're all very welcome here today. It's very enlightening as well too, your presentation. It makes me aware just of the depth of lack of facility that there are for deaf people here in the north of Ireland. And as a Gael goer, I can appreciate entirely the benefit of language. And language is about communication. That's exactly right. That's where I totally and absolutely agree with you. And that in communicating, that it brings with it its own culture as well too, as we have alluded to and referred to here. And that an understanding of language irrespective of what language that it actually is, but it enlightens us all and gives us an appreciation then too of the difficulties that people are confronted with in every respect. And it brings home to me, in fact, in your presentation, the reality of that and how it is that it exists for you. And in particular then too for the older people and the likes that may be confronted with the whole idea of going into, we'll say, an old people's home and the likes of it. There's absolutely no provision there whatsoever. And as I say, I'm very aware of that depth of lack of facility that there is in every aspect of society here in the north of Ireland. And I had hoped that in this bill and so on, that at least that there'll be an improvement there. But to what extent, something that would actually worry me, I'm sure, and it worries you as well too. But you have actually alluded to that bodies must take reasonable steps. Now, what would you see as being reasonable to meet, we'll say, your own basic needs in every way?
Again, it goes back down to providing communication. For example, today I got to the gate and I said I'm deaf, and I was able to make accommodation. But for an older deaf person who's at a time in their life where they don't have the energy or they don't have the resilience to be able to make those accommodations, they wouldn't have the confidence then to be able to do anything about that, whereas I can. So if everybody knew a little bit of sign language and a little bit of deaf awareness, it would be excellent. And I have to say, it's also about deaf people doing jobs for deaf people. So for example, if we had that deaf member of staff or a few who are able to go out to care homes, visit people, stimulate them, that would make a huge, huge difference, bringing deaf people into the forefront here.
And I think too that the work that you're doing presently, as you say, you're the only group probably in the north of Ireland, and that where you embrace people who have Irish sign language and British Sign Language. It sends out a message in a society at the present time that seems to be all over the place when it comes to embracing language, that language threatens no one, and you're showing great sort of understanding of that.
No, that as a community, that's who we are. It's deafness first. So whenever actually the Troubles were in the throes here, as a deaf community, we didn't care what side of the community you were from. For us, it was coming together, which language you used. Religion, we're very, very apolitical in that sense. Because we're deaf, because we've had the same experience and the same life experience, that deafness comes first. And the three of us have been volunteering in Bangor, and we are so happy to do that. There's no wage involved in that, because that's what we as a community believe in, helping each other. And in the Deaf Club in Bangor, we don't have deaf people here only from Bangor. We have people who travel quite a distance to get here. I mean, Rita lives in Glengormley, I live in Downpatrick. So we're all coming from far and wide to get here because it's such an important space. Doesn't matter how far you have to go, a place where you can come and be yourself, use your language and not be isolated for that little episode is so important for us. I know Bobby's saying there's 5 deaf people from Whitehead who come down to the lunch club, and that's quite a distance. And it's just because it's maybe the only time in those 2 weeks where they can communicate and talk to somebody in their own language. I mean, Whitehead is quite a distance for these people who are travelling.
Thank you indeed.
I thank you for your presentation here today, and I only but hope that services to the deaf community are greatly improved as a result of your efforts, and included even within this bill as well too, as it comes to the fore.
Thank you, Lisa. And coming then to Shan.
Thank you so much for all of your contributions today. I'm particularly struck by the conversation around the communication in the healthcare setting. So I am dealing with a constituent in my own constituency in North Antrim in the Northern Trust who couldn't access an ambulance, who couldn't, when they turned up to hospital, there was no receptionist to even say hello, as you have said. Didn't know how to book a BSL translator, didn't know that they could do that. So that just all of those systematic failures that block that access. And I suppose we talk about the that this bill might improve accessibility. Like how much of an impact would it have in terms of that independence of healthcare, do you think, if you had more people within the system, in that healthcare system, actually being able to sign and being able to communicate directly rather than either through a translator or through a family member?
Yes, but it comes down to the level and the quality of the sign language that they know. Very often people will put somebody who's got very, very minimal sign language into situations like this, and that's dangerous. That's a risk. Because what we need to realise is that, I mean, sometimes you'll see maybe a nurse who's got a little bit of sign language and a doctor will say, right, come you and interpret for me. And maybe they'll try to spell something out and they'll start with C and they'll just see this big C, and you know what the big C can mean, and it just causes misinformation, wrong information. And what we need to make sure is, if we are going to go down that route, we're having health professionals with sign language, they need to have proper skills. A few months ago, I had a Ukrainian couple who lived with me for a while, and the lady, she was ill, and we went out to the doctor, and the doctor said, yes, you need to go up to Antrim Hospital, to the ED. So I took her up to the hospital, and we were at reception, and I said, she's deaf, she's from Ukraine, can you book a BSL interpreter? And I wrote this down, and she said, no, I can't book the interpreter, you have to wait until you go into the department. So we sat anyway in the ED, and then somebody came out shouting, her name's Olga, and I could lip read it, and I went mad, and I said, can you please not speak like that? Could you write it down so that we can see it? Because you have to be in high alert to be constantly lip reading everything. So then they said, oh yes, we'll get an interpreter booked, the interpreter's on their way, but we need to get bloods done, and etc, etc. And they told us to go and sit down. Now I arrived at 10 in the morning, we sat and waited, and then the doctor came out at 1. And the doctor again was speaking at us, and I said, look, we're deaf, we need an interpreter. They said, oh, you need an interpreter. And they said, oh yes, there's an interpreter coming, but come on in anyway and we'll get started. And the doctor had the phone out, and I was thinking, what on earth is coming? And off they went, and then I realised there is a signed video interpreting service. So had the interpreter on screen, and the doctor was asking lots of questions and going through everything. And then I said, what about the interpreter? And they went out and they said, there's no interpreter available. So we had sat, and we sat then through to 9 o'clock at night. And to think, I'm doing all of this voluntarily, and I'm supporting her because the hospital didn't phone the interpreter. And I actually asked the company, I said, did a request go out? Because what we'll know is that interpreters will all get the request, and no request went out. So actually the hospital didn't phone through and didn't try to get an interpreter. So I sat there from 10 in the morning to 9 at night, and if my support wasn't there, she wouldn't have been able to access any of the treatment or any hospital care at all. So it's not good enough.
And that tracks with what I have heard from my constituent as well, and it follows into one of the other questions that I had was, have you seen any improvements or changes in access to interpreters or signed information, and where do you think those biggest gaps are at the minute?
I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that question, because I'm really here to talk about the experience of older deaf people. And for older deaf people, trying to communicate without an interpreter is going to be a massive barrier. That's all I can tell you. I mean, I can't comment really on service delivery. I just want to know that an interpreter can come out when they're requested and that they'll be booked as soon as possible. That would be my response to that question. I did try and use the app, the signed video app, when I was in hospital one time. And I got an interpreter from across the water on, as opposed to a local interpreter. And do you know, our dialect's quite strong, their dialect can be quite strong. It just left me very uncomfortable. You know, it didn't feel the same. You know what it's like when you don't have the same accent? That's what it's like. And just the number systems was very different looking from the way ours is. So I want to see more of we do have our local interpreters working on that system. I'd like to see more of them used so that I wasn't having to encounter English interpreters. I do use that remote app quite a bit. It works really well and it's great, but I just only want Northern Ireland interpreters because of the dialect issue. Rita's saying, that sign video app that we use, it's a remote interpreting service. It's fine for me. I'm not so sure that the older generation, really the very old generation, are going to use it because it's on a screen, you know, it's on a wee phone or whatever. And they're not so likely to use technology. So I think, again, whilst it's great, it's a barrier if you assume that's going to work for everybody else. And then people go, you know, they send out links to information on websites. Well, that works for a certain generation, doesn't work for older people that I would work with. I've seen people going out to their doctor and they were told to get a sick line, and then they were told, no, you had to go on a website and fill in a form. Well, that's an immediate barrier there. If you don't have great literacy skills, because English is not your first language, we do have great sign language skills, but not necessarily English, but English is what we encounter all the time.
That's a really good point. Thank you very much. I think this is one of the pieces of learning that I'll take away from this whole process, is that there are accents in sign language, just as with every other language. So I think I find that fascinating and just really interesting in terms of where people are taught their sign language really makes a difference as well. So, but thank you so much for your contribution today.
Can I just say that there was one time in the past, Rita referred to this, there was a wee bit of technology called a portal. That was just the name of this wee device. And I use that loads because it's a bit bigger than a phone as a screen. And, you know, I've seen people trying to use that, but I've also seen other people who are a bit older just can't even use that. And they'll call you over to try and help them, you know, and they can do it when somebody helps them. But then the next day, this is what we were talking about in terms of communication changing. When you're older, you don't necessarily retain information. And so I think that's the same for everybody. But if you put deaf people in the care, also there's a cost to it. I'm not great at technology, but we do use these portals, but I'm at a stage I still can. Some people can't, some people can't afford them.
Okay, so thank you all. You have brought a really valuable and important additional perspective to our meeting here this morning. I have to say it's really useful in our consideration of this bill. I have to say I'm also hugely impressed with the passion, the knowledge and the beautiful expressiveness of the language and how you've communicated with committee this morning. It's really been very, very powerful in that sense. So I want to thank you for that. We will do our utmost to reflect your concerns.
Do you mind if I just, whilst you're saying that, just add something in? For coming today, I was trying to go back over the bill. It was presented in English and that really put me off, and fixed formats can be very difficult. I've enjoyed the session with you today. I think if I'm required to respond in a fixed format like that, in English I couldn't have done that, I couldn't have read it. So thank you for the opportunity to come in person, because I think you've got a very different response than you're ever going to get from a written response.
Well, I believe we have enjoyed it collectively as well, but probably more importantly, we have benefited.
Well, that's great to hear.
We have benefited hugely from it, and we will do our utmost to reflect the concerns and the experience that you're bringing to us, to see how I suppose we're always concerned to ensure that this bill delivers the maximum benefit and significant progress forward. And I do think one of the issues I think that's very clear is the postcode lottery that other people experience is writ large here, and the need for this to be regional, to be local and to be relevant to yourselves. So thank you, Claire, thank you, Rita, and thank you, Bobby. You have really, really assisted us today. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So members, good luck. Thank you, members. Members, I just want to check if there's any follow-up actions. Okay. Goodbye. Members, any follow-up action members want to flow out of that session? Members want to pick up on? Andy?
Sure, maybe, and it's not specifically for the bill, but obviously the health pieces that we heard there are concerning, and we can continue to pick those up through the bill, but perhaps, I know it's slightly outside of our remit, but it's not, in a sense, right to health to raise the concerns that were raised and explore what is in place and what they're doing to improve what is in place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Martin Point, Pam, then Kelly.
No, I completely agree with Andy there, and I'm sure, like Rochelle and myself, will be following up with the Northern Trust as well as individual MLAs. But I think it's really important that we raise the issues as they arise, so that people can start and work on these. I mean, these opportunities with interpreters just are life changing. You know, in terms of communication, it's something that struck me quite a few years ago. The first time I had a meeting, it was during the COVID time, and we had a Zoom, and it was fantastic with interpreters, and it was like somebody switched the lights on, because finally, you know, the difference between, you know, handwritten messages back and forward, trying to communicate, it's so difficult, but things became so clear, and for not just for the deaf community, but for us, because we can't know how, you know, what they're trying to express to us and what they're feeling without that interpretation either. So it's not just for the deaf community, it's in order that the rest of us can know what the issues are and we can actually deal with them and that we can actually represent them. We can't do that without proper interpretation.
The families of deaf people and all of that. I have to say, I was struck. It occurred to me during the session, but I didn't want to go this direction with questioning because of the energy and the animation and the life. However, one of the things that struck me in relation to that part of the conversation was around end-of-life care and end-of-life discussion. Because for some of those cases, there may be a second opportunity to get it right and make up some of the damage that. So there are other conversations where you won't, and that occurred to me. So I think it's vital that we do flag this to health. Kelly, I think we're looking at.
Would we be able to find out? They mentioned about the PA scheme in England was different to how you access PAs here. What that system is, it's just because when we're talking in the bill about resources, it would be useful just to understand the differences. The other thing was the technology that was being discussed. We do talk about technology within this bill, but a point there is not everybody can afford to buy the technology. There's no mention in the bill about resourcing of the technology. I know it's very general and it's all encompassing and future proofing, but I think there has to be something there. If we're going to write into a bill the use of technology, it's how are deaf people going to access the actual hardware of the technology, and to ensure that deaf people are involved in the type, you know, which type of technology we would use. There's also another thing, what the folks there were talking about with regards to accessing healthcare. That's a breach of health and safety at work legislation, because you're supposed to provide resources for people who use your services as part of that. And I just wonder if we could maybe ask health, have they any, or what do they do to ensure that there is appropriate health and safety considerations assessments done for deaf people? Because maybe that's something that's missing out of this, because there's another piece of legislation that can actually help with this bill.
The Department for Health or the
Department of Health, they would actually be over the risk assessments as well, but it's that part of what risk assessments have the Health Trust done on their own services for deaf people to ensure that risk isn't there, that, you know, a deaf person maybe isn't aware of what they're being told, or they can't tell the medical person what the problems are. That's
okay.
Thank you, Kelly. Sean?
First of all, I just want to say, this bill and scrutinising of it has been the biggest learning curve that I've ever had. In terms, I don't think that we can underestimate the value of the lived experience that we've actually heard here on this committee. It's incredible. It's been an incredible experience because we're just getting every facet of a particular community. So, like, fair play to our clerks team for the organisation of that. I just think it adds such a depth to the scrutiny that we're actually hearing from people that are going to be impacted by this bill. There's a couple of things for me just around. First of all, the alarms and the flashing lights in Foals and in care homes. I'm not aware if there's any legislation around even like private rentals or anything. There's obviously legislation around fire alarms and CO detectors that we've seen come into play in the last 2 years, I think they were. And I'm just wondering, is there legislation that actually covers if you have a deaf resident, a deaf tenant, that you need to have a specific type of fire alarm and that flashing alarm. I'm really struck, and it was during one of the consultation events in Banbridge that I'd went to, and a woman being told her story that her colleague had to pass a piece of paper under a toilet stall to her to say, fire alarm, get out. And the constituent that I saw last week said that she and her friend were locked in their place of work because everybody forgot that they were in the storeroom, and they came out and it was a bomb. It was a bomb threat, bomb scare. Thank you, that's the word I was looking for. A bomb scare, and they came walking out, and the place was absolutely abandoned, and the bomb squad were at the front door. It was an antrim that had happened. And so those sorts of things that I think around that alarm system, the health and safety element, I think is just really, I'm finding that really interesting. And then if we're writing to health, it would be for me really interesting to ask, have they considered that peripatetic, is that the right word? Peripatetic workers that actually do have those skills, that level of qualification and skill, to be able to go around the different, either whether it's in a care home setting or whether it's in a ward setting, if there are those who are maybe on a ward for more than a few days, that you have a list of those inpatients, that someone is actually be able to go around who has that really high quality and high level of language, because that was really interesting. That you think in your head any level of sign, anything at all would be really good, but actually when Bobby was talking about when they start and they're saying the C, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, when they actually don't have a really good level, that it can actually pose risks in that medical setting. So that was really, really useful. But I think those are the things that are coming out for me.
Yeah. The evidence in person is materially different from the evidence that was submitted as well.
To be honest, is they have highlighted the way that we have asked for it in written English, and English isn't their first language.
Well, we also did offer the signed videos. We did. But again, it's what people are comfortable with.
Yeah, it's so different. Yeah, because I sort of thought
Very
they're happy
different.
with everything. No, they're not. Yeah.
I suppose, Chair, it just highlights the complexity of the whole issue, because with the best will in the world and all the money in the world, you know, what does provision look like? Because one size does not fit all. It's incredibly complex, and in order to open up that worlds we can actually be able to communicate with each other is incredibly challenging.
And what worries me coming out of it is the issue around alarms and the homes issue is clearly, however, what's even worse is private residents, in the sense of somebody with a smoke alarm system in a house that doesn't meet their needs and won't alert them to, you know, and that's a vast issue, and one that again, I think this bill certainly isn't going to address. So it's something that I think
There's an opportunity for us later. You know, we can add in an action plan, for instance, that people need to consider. What's the building regulations or landlord, you know, responsibilities, that sort of things. There's every department has something to do.
simple enough changes could be made. It will take a while. They've been far from simple, but recognising them in the first instance and then starting to at least put in the start of a solution. Like, it wouldn't be that much more difficult to make it visible at the time when you're putting it in as audio. Retrofitting would be huge, but there are huge safety issues there, and we're hugely concerned. Okay, Clark, are you happy enough with the elements that we have raised? We do need to take a short break, but we'll only pause just to set up the next set of witnesses and interpreters. So we'll just take a short pause and we'll get to the next part of the session. Chris, thank you.
Thank you.
We're running on ahead with
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound.
She confirmed live.
Okay, thank you, members, and we are now moving to agenda item 8, which is a briefing by the Christian Fellowship Church Sign Language Centre on the Sign Language Bill. Members, the briefing paper for this agenda item is at page 525. I now like to welcome to the meeting Daniel Voss, and Daniel is Sign Language Pastor with the Christian Fellowship Church Sign Language Centre, and you are welcome today, Daniel. Could I please invite you to make an opening statement, and then we will move to questions from members. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's actually an honour to be here, so really appreciate it. Just kind of want to explain who I am first before I go into the background what I do. So I'm originally from London. I came to Northern Ireland 12 years ago. So I'm fully deaf. I grew up in a hearing family, and through that I've spoken through my life, and I attended mainstream school and university. Although I can use my voice, I often found things quite difficult because my identity was missing. I tried to blend in, but I came to the cost of my well-being. And then probably about 13 years ago, I moved to Northern Ireland to study Belfast Bible College. And that was Rita and Raymond Abernethy, you met them in the previous meeting. So I joined that, and that when I discovered the deaf community in Northern Ireland, and then I started to learn BSL and understand about deaf culture, and I realised how much I missed out on. So the first time I kind of found my missing identity, if that makes sense, and then felt like belonging in the deaf community. And so yeah, I just kind of want to speak to it coming straight from what I'm going to say word for word. So I do use sign language from time to time, and I just find it a struggle to pick up on sign language interpreters. It's difficult to book one, high in demand, and I just always feel guilty in getting interpreted when other people need it the most. But so my role, I serve at the Sign Language Pastor at CFC. We're based on the Belmont Road. We have 6 sites, so we have 6 different, so we have one in East, Antrim, Hollywood, and so on. So SLC will be celebrating 40th anniversary next year. We started in 1986. I'm the 3rd deaf pastor, followed by Raymond Abernethy, who you know, and Adam McCormick. You might know Adam McCormick, he's quite a famous guy. He's your cousin, is he? Oh, very good. There you go. Our mission is clear. It's a Christ-centred community dedicated to impact the Belfast, Ireland and the nation of the love of God through the power of the Holy Spirit. So we currently have about 40 people attending our weekly service. In 2024, we launched both Sunday school and a BSL Top, which is for baby to preschoolers. BSL Top run midweek on a Tuesday morning had grown from 2 children, which is my boy, and to 15 children, a mix of hearing and deaf families, coded, interpreted and others, have become a beautiful place for connection and belonging. So at the moment, statistics show that only 2% of deaf Christians attend church in Northern Ireland alone. Currently 98% without regular access to worship. That's mainly due to shortage of interpreters. We also do not have a Bible translated into BSL for Northern Ireland, although I'm just hoping we're able to get that established soon. We're trying to get funding from America to get a BSL translation that truly reflects Northern Ireland sign language and culture. So it's important to remember that BSL had a completely different grammatical structure from English. For example, we say, "What's your name?" in English. It could be such in BSL, you name what. And because of the differences, many deaf people struggle to understand written English, including the Bible. So some of our church only access learning about God and the Bible come through what is preached on a Sunday, because they cannot easily read or understand written English text themselves. So I just kind of explain the real life example scenario that I kind of face every day dealing with deaf people. So I think a really good example of that is when I had someone who came to me with 20 letters of electricity bill, and he only realised when there was a red warning letter on there, saying no red of the colour, and it was something urgent. So he came to me and asked what he was meant to be doing, and I had to kind of translate word for word what he was meant to be doing, where he was meant to pay off and all this. And quite often on the letter it would say you have to call this number. So this is another barrier on top that we have to face. And quite often when we use sign videos called, some of them could be from England, and the regional variation is like accent, it's a little bit different from England, and therefore can lead to miscommunication. And yeah, it just gets broken down really badly. It's even harder for people who come from a different country. So it's a different country, and not just that, sometimes the connection can be quite poor, can be quite frustrating, and then it just doesn't come across really good. Everything is done at a slower pace, so everything's 4 times slower than usual. Stuff like when we have, I think sometimes you kind of need a deaf translator to kind of help that scenario. Deaf people will have an understanding of deaf culture better, they might understand the deaf person emotion of what they're trying to say and convey, and that's why there's something that we could bring in. As a pastor and within the church, when teaching the Bible, it's not enough to translate word for word. We need to help people understand context and meaning. So the Bible version, we can know it had a lot of complex and full of layers. For deaf members, understanding often requires visual example and relatable stories to connect the meaning. So if I just translate word for word, they may get the surface of it, but I have to kind of dig deep and just show the visual stories and kind of show them a lot of examples, they can understand what the Bible verse is telling them. It is hard for our ministry, just helping deaf people not to have access to faith, but understand it deeply in their own language and culture. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. That was very useful, and again, an interesting other perspective on the very real impacts. I have to say, I was struck at the very start of your presentation when you mentioned about having to blend in and the cost that has to your well-being. I think something almost identical was said by Ellie Mae O'Connell, who we heard from in this committee, almost word for word. I was really strongly reminded of that session, and that is hugely regrettable that people should have to share that experience as a fundamental, what it almost seems like part of their collective experience. So I'll just couple for me. So in terms of questions, can you say a bit more about the quality of interpreters and your experience of this? You have noted in your response that you didn't support the creation of an accreditation scheme, which clause 10 relates to. Is there something else you feel would deal with the quality issue if it's not accreditation?
That's a good question. I think the standard of interpreted, it's hard to find, and normally a good quality interpreter a lot harder to get. So I think I don't really know too much in terms of training with interpreters. I think they do have their own training per year, but I think that the standard of that, it kind of needs to have, I think some interpreters coming in, probably from England, are coming into this culture, and not everyone fully understands deaf culture, and that is something kind of needs to be embedded in, and an interpreter kind of really understand the emotional well-being of the deaf person, and that can kind of raise their profile. But added of training, I wouldn't know too much about that, but I'm just saying interpreted, for me, they will have to be involved in the deaf community, because that's the only one way to find out. I mean, you can do a lot of training, go to university for years, but if you don't kind of adapt that culture, you kind of miss the whole point of it. So I think they need to understand culture really well to understand what needs to be delivered.
Okay, thank you. And you've outlined really practical challenges that people from the deaf community face. Do you feel this bill, as it stands, will address these and other challenges, or do you think the bill goes far enough?
Do you mean the common bill at the moment? Or
Yes.
No, not enough.
So in what way is it not enough, and what do you think would be needs to be added or considered to make it robust?
We'll be here all night if I have to tell you all this. I think it's kind of need. I do think we need to have something like a community, like a little hub that deaf people can come together. It'd be a safe place for them to come. There's one in just outside Dublin called Deaf Sport Village. And I think they all come together as a community, and that's somewhere they can establish. I think they used to have the one called Wilton House years ago, but then that all closed down because they had all the deaf organisation in one place. And I do think we need more. I do think we need to establish deaf translators as well, and not just hearing interpreters. I say that because a lot of deaf translators can actually translate word for word, where interpreters translate the English, that will be their job, and then the deaf people have to kind of go into the deeper stuff, because not everyone will fully understand if they just watch. And so I had a load of notes on there, but I'm not sure. Do you want me to go through?
No, well, I'm trying to get a sense of what specifically you think might need to change within the bill to deliver on kind of the expectations. Is there one specific thing, for example, that you think would improve the outcome of the bill?
I think mostly sign language would be the most important thing. And I think training, and you embed that in school and all this, I think a lot of people will become, it is only one way to increase interpreters, because we are very, very short interpreted in this country at the moment. There's a lot of things that need to be improved, like technology, definitely in hospital. I think if we have some sort of tablet set up, like an iPad, with a system that will connect to sign video, that will be one step forward to make things a lot easier. There is the future development of, I don't want to say this, but AI, but I don't think AI is ready yet, because I've seen it and I don't think they have that visual expression and deaf culture embedded into that system yet. But it could change in the next 5-10 years. I don't really know about that. There's not enough evidence to say that. But I do think we need to be one step ahead when people come into hospital and deaf people need interpreted, and that we need to have that ready for them. And I do think if we get that, like an iPad all set up with all the sign video and a really good Wi-Fi connection established in that place, this will make one step easier for everyone to access.
Yep.
I also think the website itself will need to be translated into sign language. I say that from my company that worked at CFC, we had a membership pack which was full of English, and a lot of deaf people wouldn't understand it word for word, but that had to be translated in sign language. So there was a company I got in contact with, and they were looking for charity from Google, and they would manage to get one to get established in our church. It's to try and increase accessibility. So that the most important thing is accessibility is the first and foremost. Because if you go to a house nowadays, all the buildings must have a wheelchair ramp around the house. They must have that certain degree of it. If we get that foundation set up properly for the deaf community, I think we will go a long way away.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. And I'm going to Melissa then. Go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you all for Daniel. You're very welcome here today, Daniel, and I'm glad to hear again too, just from your perspective, we had a very insightful meeting prior to you coming in here from another group of people representing the deaf community. In relation to the actual bill itself, Daniel, do you think is the language deaf enough in it? In other words, like whenever we sort of see things like must, may, or due regard, is that language at times maybe going to give a let out that where, whilst they pass legislation, but it isn't that effective at the end of the day because of that language that is used that would allow, we'll say, departments or whatever to sort of avoid, we'll say, taking it on board, especially if it brings with it a cost or the likes?
It's a very good question. I think for deaf people, when we read that, we think automatically that's how it should be. And I think, regarding English, you can play on words and all that, and that for you can understand how to twist it in the way that it's kind of like not a power control. It's more like you have that thing. Oh, that's okay. We can get away with it. I think for deaf people, when they see that, they think it should happen, and I think that wording needs to change for certain. It needs to be clear. It needs to be black and white. It just can't be grey in that area, because otherwise we're just going to be going around the block again. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for your written evidence before and coming today. I noticed in your written evidence you talk about deaf culture more. It's not just about BSL and ISL, it's about a person's life. And you talked about the hub. And we heard earlier from a group of older deaf people about the importance of communication and coming together. I'm just wondering if there's anywhere in this bill that we can enhance the definition of the term deaf culture to say that there needs to be support to build a community.
So the question you're asking about deaf culture and in the community, how do we enhance that? Yeah? Yeah. I think deaf culture is normally established in the community where deaf people come together. So we have things like SLC or Hand That Talk, HTT, or any deaf club. That's where deaf community all come together and kind of dwell together. And I think at the moment, I don't think there is a hub for them to come and connect in the place where they feel this is the place where they all come together and to regularly meet up. So you have things like the deaf pub, where people meet up in the pub setting, that deaf culture embedded that. But you saying that, how do you get deaf culture into a community?
I think in the bill, the wording that's used is that it's primarily only about sign language, which is important, absolutely, but people are more, they have, things that they want to do, hobbies, interests, and that culture isn't included in the bill. How could we improve upon that?
I think just have a deaf hub in town, because that's only one way to kind of establish the deaf culture and people to come along to it. Because at the moment we're having it's in a place where no one have access to it. It's like WhatsApp, and if someone out here in the community want to join it, or you get new deaf people want to join in, they wouldn't know where it is. So I think it needs to be a place where they know that where the place to be.
So in the bill, when we talk about promoting sign language and deaf culture, we need to maybe look at defining what that promotion is going to look like going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed was whenever the bill talks about reasonable adjustments, I think I'm on the same page as you. I don't think that affordability should be used for a bill that will take 5 years to come into play for someone to say, I don't have enough money to do that, because they should have been planning for it. Do you think that we should take out that reasonable adjustments? To me, I think that the only person who can decide if a reasonable adjustment is appropriate is a deaf person.
I think I remember in 2022 or 21 when we had BSL recognition of the sign language, and everyone in the deaf community thought this is it and it's going to change her life forever, and then it wasn't like that. I don't think a lot of them was quite disappointed by that. So I think the reasonable adjustment is very wide and broad, and a lot of people think, oh, they probably can read caption, let's get a subtitle in, but not everyone can read that. Or they might be able to find someone, I don't know, a chief interpreter who is level 3 or level 2 standards, and that's not really matching the level of the language they're taking in. I think reasonable adjustment is just too varied. It's not very, very clear, and it needs to be very, very clear from start on. And
then finally, in your written response, you talked about the ability, if a person is not provided with sign language, that there needs to be some way that they can take action to make sure that that doesn't happen. Do you think that this bill needs to be more specific to say what a person should be expecting to receive, and therefore then the Disability Discrimination Act could be used if an organisation doesn't provide that?
You say that question again?
So it's just to say, when you talked about someone being able to take action if they're not provided with sign language, for instance, do we need to be very prescriptive in this bill so that if someone is not provided, for instance in health, with an interpreter at accident and emergency, then that would be a failing that could then be linked to the Disability Discrimination Act?
Yeah, I think that's very, very good. I think in America, the accessibility on website is a must by the government law, and therefore if the company don't do that, they will get fined a lot of money. And I think if we establish that here, it will save us. I think you have to think about it. The mental health in the deaf community is 3 times higher than the normal community, and a lot of people, they suffer the most, and they suffer. And it's just what Rita said in the previous meeting, that she was there for 10 hours just waiting for an interpreter, and that's not on. And I honestly do think if you have that set in place, it will make people put that on top of their list, and that will make a massive difference.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, members, so thank you, Daniel. Again, that has brought a very specific perspective and additional information to committee, which will be very useful for us in the development and in the committee stage of this bill. So, thank you. Thank you.
I just have one question. I want to say this. In Finland, the country, they have. I think Southern Ireland have this as well, and they have like every person get 1 year of interpreter support. So many hours they get. I don't know, about 100 hours a year for free, provided by the government. And I honestly think that if you do that here in Northern Ireland, it will make a massive difference. Because you have to think about every single day that people do, like getting their car sorted out in a mechanic or going to the council and all these sort of things. And a lot of these companies can't really provide that, and not a lot of these companies have signed videos. So if you have that sort of scheme for them, I think it will just make a big difference. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. We will look at that. I appreciate that. So I want to thank Daniel and all of the witnesses, and I also want to thank the interpreters here today. There's been a very lively and interactive sessions. Taking both sessions into account, and I'm sure that has been your interpretation has greatly assisted our consideration of the bill. So I want to thank yourselves. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, members. So we just to advise that there was to be a third briefing today, but before I go to that, is there any follow-up action in relation to that particular session that members want to pick up on?
Could I just ask for some clarity? What was that last point that was being made there? I couldn't hear it correctly.
The point was that there are some schemes in some countries, including potentially Finland and Dublin. We'll probably see can we get further information, where people are provided with a certain, like almost a fund of
100 free
interpretation.
hours of interpretation.
100 free hours. So if you go to your mechanic, you have access to up to 100 free hours in the course of a year of interpretation to assist you with. Some of them are practical and some probably similar to what Kelly had.
Voucher scheme has come back in some of the written evidence as well, a suggestion of this type of voucher scheme if you're deaf or hard of hearing and might need interpretation to go about your daily activities.
Right, so therefore you would use this coupon then, we'll say, to bring an interpreter in?
Yeah, help you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pat.
I think it's a great idea, although you're reliant on actually having a pool of interpreters, and that is a huge issue. And I know we can, in terms of accreditation, it's very difficult for people who do sign actually to actually get the official accreditation, the official qualification, because of the lack of people in Northern Ireland that can actually accredit them. So there are huge issues. Like, and the fact that we're very familiar with all the faces of the interpreters tells you how few there are, and I think that's going to be a major challenge going forward. That has to be.
The other thing that came up in both sessions, actually, and worth maybe flagging now as well, is that issue around the current video interpretation service and its lack of maybe potential access to the particular dialect or form here. And I also wonder, is Irish? So I wonder, is there anybody within that system who's from here? Not that they would always be available. Availability is a problem. I also wonder, is there any ISL available in that? And I suppose really, does that, if there's a potential gap there, how or should that be looked at in terms of trying to fill that gap? And because technology clearly could play a huge advantage, but we need to be very careful that it doesn't further discriminate against people by not being fully inclusive, because technology can roll over the top of people in another way.
In fact,
Kelly first, then maybe Melissa.
I'm going to follow up on that point. The point was made with the older persons group that deaf people themselves could be used to help to translate and do different things. So the issue is that we have a sign language bill coming forward here, and everybody is thinking that it's going to be gold plated the first day it comes into action, but we actually have 5 years for it to before the first sort of reporting comes through. So there's time to build this, but in the interim, if we're building all these processes, I think that's something that we might need to consider as part of that first reporting period. Is it's not for the face of the bill. This is the problem. It would be in explanatory notes to ask the department to clarify how are they going to lead into this. How are they going to meet expectations? How are they going to deliver on the number of PAs, for instance, that are going to be required, or translators, because we won't have trained everybody. It takes 7 years to train someone right up. So it's how we're going to deal with that until we have enough translators there to help people. I'm a little concerned that nothing can happen until those 7 years have passed and we've got a number of people coming through. It's just, I think that question needs to be asked of the department, in that interim 5 years, what can be done, and it can't all be AI.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because there is that danger, and I suppose that speaks to the point about how important our report, as well as any particular change, but our report on this one, I think, will be very, very significant and important, that we include a lot of these perspectives and subtlety and nuance and really, while the impact of those are not subtle or nuanced, they're very, very grave, but they need to be accounted for. Melissa?
Just through the chair too, just at the time of the consultation, and I remember that I attended an event in Strabane, we actually had an example of how people could communicate with the interpreter online whenever they needed service and so on. I thought that in itself was brilliant, but with that it brings the additional problem, as was highlighted here today, that for older people and the likes of it, that where either they don't have the hardware or the technology in itself to be able to cope, or the ability to cope with the technology in itself, so that again too, that would require a whole sort of like training exercise there and the likes of it as well, to ensure equality of opportunity for all, say, and irrespective of where it is that they live as well too, because it would depend entirely on things right down to whether or not you actually have a signal that brings you online and things of that nature, you know.
I think, it's more than clear that there's no equality for the deaf community, and I think it's a fabulous idea, the idea of the deaf culture hub. And I'm just very cognizant of, you know, we're only getting short snippets of information from the deaf community, and as the clerk has noted, that, you know, the evidence is materially different when it's literally translated in front of you. The communication is completely different, and you're going to get a whole different side of things. I think I'm not sure how we deal with that as a committee, because we are very limited to what we can get, and the deaf community are very limited in terms of even this provision as to how they can come back to us. And, you know, in terms of follow-up, have we got any, is there anything more, will there be any more opportunities, or can we squeeze more opportunities in there for the deaf community to come back, you know, as they see us deliberating through this? You know, where will their opportunity be to come back and almost do this again within the limited resources that we all have in terms of time and interpretation? But I think it's important that you kind of try to keep the conversations going, because that's the only way we're going to learn what the need is in terms of provision. Yeah, and I suppose what that speaks to is something that we have touched on, is the need for reiteration and reiteration throughout the process, and that co-design and consultation is robust and continues apace. And I think that's one of the issues around at least one, which is mentioned in the bill, that is one that's become particularly focused. But I think I think it's more a case of ensuring, or it's equally a case of ensuring that as this bill gets implemented, that the process continues and the engagement continues.
I was going to say the best way to do that is to put into the bill a strategy and action plan with times and targets on it, because that will give that follow-on. It won't precisely name what the departments, and I say departments because this is an act that will cover all of them. It won't specifically say, but it'll give them, for instance, if they have an action plan to review and consider and put things in place, it keeps that rolling forward. So I know I'm quite keen, actually, I've been looking at this, because there's so much of this that we could put in the face of the bill. It won't make any sense, because it's for a time and a place, because we'd be hoping, and once there is a number of people who've been trained up, then the issue with the lack of interpreters will be dealt with. So in 10 years' time, hopefully that will not be an issue, but we could put in an action plan with a reporting period that ties in with what the bill's already suggesting, to require reporting how this is being updated. And it means then we're not tying the departments down to something that we don't yet know about. So I know I have a few amendments coming forward, and we talked to Liz about that. Yeah.
Yep. And I do get your point, Pam, in terms of our work in the committee stage and how we make it reiterative, and I'll just check with the clerk on that.
Yeah, no, we did, when it was open to consultation, there was a WhatsApp system set up, so we liaised with them, and everyone who was willing to give evidence was able to send in a signed video. So we asked the questions in sign, and that was first off with the assistance of the IS service here, and then we spent the summer getting those interpreted by our interpretation service. So we also have 2 more events coming up, so we've specifically reached out to today's witnesses, having gone through their evidence. We have next week with families and children who are deaf, and the following week with SENSE, so Deaf Blind organisation for tactile and sensory. So if there's anything further we think we can do, by all means let me know. However, that is us at the end of our proactive approach to trying to get as much evidence in as possible.
Yeah, and we have been very conscious. We have sought an extension based on an understanding of the amount of engagement we're going to have to do, and how that engagement would have to meet the needs insofar as we can possibly ensure for people who are contributing. But I think it's important. It's an important element of both our work, and as this process rolls out, that there is repeated checking back, checking the thinking's right, tweaking potentially what's happening to make sure it's meeting the needs, and taking account of technology and more interpreters coming available, that ambition and that progress would be continued at pace in consultation with those people who are impacted. Okay, thank you, members. That's all very useful and appreciated. So just to say that there was to be a third briefing today, but the witnesses were unavailable to attend. A briefing paper for this agenda item, and it was agenda item 9, is provided in your packet, page 532, in the form of the organisation's response to the committee's Citizen Space Survey. Members, this evidence will inform our deliberations in the forthcoming weeks, and if possible, we'll identify an alternative date to hear from hands that talk. So, members, we do need to allow the change, or are we now okay to go ahead on?
We still need a
break.
Yeah,
so
to go into the booth.
We do need to take a break to reset things and go into the do the interpretation of all of this. So can I please suggest, with members' consent, we take another further 5-minute comfort break? Yep, thank you, members. And we'll come out of broadcasting.
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound.
Is she confirmed open?
Okay, thank you, Clerk. Thank you, members. And we're now resuming our meeting at agenda item 10. And this is a departmental briefing on Pension Schemes Bill Legislative Consent Motion. So the papers for the agenda item are at page 542. And I'd now like to welcome to our meeting Hayley Ward, who is policy lead in this area. We have Michelle Grills, who also policy lead, and Tommy Boyle, deputy policy lead. So Hayley, I invite you to go ahead and please make a brief opening statement, and then we'll come to questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to attend committee today. We're pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you about the legislative consent motion for the inclusion of Northern Ireland measures within the Westminster Pension Schemes Bill, which I'll refer to as the Bill. The measures for inclusion relate to FCA-regulated pension schemes contractual override, the validity of certain alterations to salary-related contracted-out pension schemes, which was previously known as retrospective actuarial confirmation of benefit changes, alienation or forfeiture of occupational pension, terminal illness, and the pensions dashboard. I will briefly run through the background to the legislative consent motion and then the legislative consent motion provisions themselves. Although pensions are a devolved matter, in general, Northern Ireland's pension policy and legislation operate in line with corresponding pension provision in Great Britain as provided for in Section 87 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. In effect, there is a single pension system and regulatory regime across the United Kingdom. Indeed, many private pension schemes operating in Northern Ireland are UK-wide schemes. A Westminster Pension Schemes Bill was announced in the King's Speech on July 17, 2024. The Department for Work and Pensions introduced the bill into the House of Commons on the 5th of June 2025 with the intention of achieving royal assent by spring 2026. The DWP timeline for the bill presents several issues with progressing corresponding measures through an executive bill. Several measures are intended to become operational when the Westminster Bill receives royal assent or shortly after. A parity executive bill would not normally be introduced to the Assembly until there is no further opportunity for amendments to the corresponding Westminster Bill. This means that the executive bill cannot be passed to meet the same operational date as the Westminster Bill for these measures. In view of the significant challenges with progressing a parity pension schemes bill on all elements, and the associated risk to citizens in Northern Ireland being treated less favourably than people in Great Britain, the Executive agreed on the 2nd of October to seek the Assembly's agreement to a legislative consent motion to extend the Westminster Bill to Northern Ireland for the 5 measures I have referred to earlier. A separate Executive Bill is proposed to address the remaining provisions within the Westminster Pension Schemes Bill. I will now give a brief overview of each of the provisions to be included in the legislative consent motion. Clause 48, the FCA Regulated Pension Schemes Contractual Override. This measure primarily concerns reserved financial matters. However, it is included within the legislative consent motion due to its connection to devolved pension policy. The provision will enable providers to transfer a member's contract to another provider or vary contractual terms without the need for individual consent, where this meets the best interest test. This will give greater consolidation within the pension market and deliver improved outcomes for members. A range of safeguards and procedural requirements will apply before any override or transfer can take place, ensuring robust protection for members. The measure also underpins the effective operation of other provisions within the bill, including value for money framework and the consolidation of small pension pots. While HM Treasury retains responsibility for the Financial Services and Markets Act regulations, the legislation delegates authority to the Financial Conduct Authority to set out operational rules for contractual override, aligning with existing Financial Services and Markets Act safeguards. This measure amends the Financial Services and Markets Act 2000 with reference to the Pensions No. 2 Act Northern Ireland 2008 and the Pension Schemes Northern Ireland Act 1993. Clauses 104 to 107, validity of certain alterations to salary-related contracted out pension schemes. This measure was not part of the original bill. It arises from the Virgin Media v NTL case. In June 2023, the High Court and later the Court of Appeal ruled that an amendment to the NTL pension trustee schemes was invalid because it lacked actuarial confirmation under Section 37 of the Pension Schemes Act 1993 or Section 33 in Northern Ireland. The case relates to a contracting out regime that applied between 1997 and its abolition in 2016, and the judgment could have significant implications for similar defined benefit schemes. The policy intention is to restore certainty around scheme liabilities and funding by allowing schemes to retrospectively obtain actuarial confirmation that benefit changes made during that period met the reference scheme test, even if written confirmation was not obtained at the time. This will involve a professional opinion from an actuary, supported by guidance from the pensions regulator and the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. However, if an actuary cannot confirm that the test would have been met, the amendment will remain void, safeguarding members and ensuring the legislation is not used to validate non-compliant changes. This does not amend any existing legislation. It sets out a new provision, though it does refer to definitions in the Pension Schemes Northern Ireland Act 1993, Pensions Northern Ireland Order 1995, Occupational Pension Schemes Contracting Out Regulations Northern Ireland 1996, and the Pensions Northern Ireland Order 2005. Clause 108, alienation or forfeiture of occupational pension. A recent High Court ruling confirmed that the Pension Ombudsman does not have the status of competent court under Section 91(6) of the Pensions Act 1995, reversing previous practice. This has created challenges for enforcing decisions on pensions overpayments recovery. At the same time, the Pensions Ombudsman has faced rising demand, COVID-related disruption and a 2023 cyber attack leading to significant case backlogs. In the last 5 years, 821 cases from Northern Ireland were referred to the Pension Ombudsman, 291 via schemes and 530 from customer complaints. The policy intention is not to grant new powers, but to restore the Pension Ombudsman original 1993 role by reaffirming its status as competent court. This change will remove the need for schemes to seek court enforcement, reducing costs and delays for courts, schemes and members, and ensuring an efficient, accessible way to resolve pension disputes. This provision amends Pensions Northern Ireland Order 1995. Clause 109, terminal illness. The Pension Protection Fund and the Financial Assistance Scheme play a vital role in safeguarding members of defined benefit pension schemes when employers become insolvent or schemes cannot meet their liabilities. At present, members diagnosed with a terminal illness and a life expectancy of 6 months or less can access their payments early. This measure seeks to extend that definition to 12 months, bringing it into line with similar provision in Social Security and tax legislation. By doing so, it ensures that terminally ill members can receive financial support sooner, at a time when it's most needed. This change will particularly benefit those with a prognosis of more than 6 months but less than a year, who would not otherwise have qualified under the current rules. The Assembly previously approved this measure through a legislative consent motion for inclusion in a Westminster Private Members Bill. However, that bill fell following the dissolution of Parliament for the 2024 general election. This provision amends Pensions Northern Ireland Order 2005 and the Pensions No. 2 Act Northern Ireland 2008. And finally, Clause 111, Pensions Dashboard. The legislative consent motion covers only the amendment to the Financial Guidance and Claims Act to allow the Money and Pension Service to include information relating to the Pension Protection Fund and the Financial Assistance Scheme on its dashboard, including individual level data. At present, the Pension Protection Fund and Financial Assistance Schemes are excluded from the dashboards as they are classified as compensation schemes rather than traditional pension schemes. However, many individuals rely on these payments as part of their retirement income, and their inclusion would significantly enhance the effectiveness and completeness of the service for members of these schemes. So that provides a brief overview of the measures proposed, and we would be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Hayley. That's very much appreciated. And just if I may, I'd like to just note the fact that we've been joined by a large number of young people from McIlwraith and St Michael's in Enniskillen, in my own constituency. And I suppose it's appropriate we're dealing with pensions now, but we're also just I'm thoughtful of the fact that we have previously in committee brought forward work and been involved in work around reducing the age at which young people can access pensions. But in terms of questions in this, Hayley, and there's quite a lot in it, and I suppose similar to all of these LCMs, there's always that concern around, well, first of all, we're absolutely determined and keen to see that people here are receiving parity in terms of getting access to any benefits and improvements in a timely fashion. However, there's also the other part of that where there could be specific issues here which create difficulties or which the LCM might not pick up on. And I'm conscious there's a specific element additional here. My first question is back to one that has come up previously around the winter fuel payments, and I know we have seen significant numbers of people affected who live on the other side of the border here on the island of Ireland losing out in terms of winter fuel payment. Can you clarify or confirm that there will be no negative impact on people in relation to this LCM that hasn't been considered, and that's not discriminating against people living on the other side of the border but who have developed a pension here?
Okay, so all the legislative reforms resulting from the measures contained within the legislative consent motion, and indeed the wider Pension Schemes Bill, relate only to UK-based and operated pension schemes which are registered with HMRC and fall within the regulatory remit of the pensions regulator. So any individuals who are members of UK-based pension schemes will be subject to the benefits arising from the introduction of these measures regardless of where they reside. The reverse of this is residents of Northern Ireland who perhaps have a Republic of Ireland-based pension will be unaffected, as those pension schemes are regulated by Irish law and not UK-based law. So people who live on the border, around the border, maybe live in the south but have a UK-based pension scheme, they will receive all of the benefits of this legislative consent motion.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful, Hayley. The second one from myself is around you'd referred to the court proceedings and the changes there in terms of accessibility. There was positive message around reducing costs and improving accessibility. I would like to check, is there any diminution of rights attached to that? Is there anything that we need to be concerned about in terms of people's rights as a result of that change?
Can I just clarify, are you talking about the pension ombudsman?
Yeah, you're saying there's going to be access to the Ombudsman rather than having to go to court, that there will be access that way. Will
on cross-border?
No, this is not. This is just anybody? In general. This is not cross-border. This is across the board. Across.
So, implementing the pension ombudsman being the competent court, it means that it'll simplify things or overpayment cases. It will make decisions easier. We won't have a long drawn-out process that would have to go through a court proceeding. So no, I don't believe that there will be any diminution of rights. If anything, it will make things quicker, more efficient and better for both members and schemes.
Okay, thank you. And the final one for me then, but before I come to members, is around the timeline of the executive bill. You've mentioned the fact that the LCM will deal with part of it. There will be a need for a further executive bill. What are we looking at in terms of timeline for that executive bill coming forward?
So the executive bill wouldn't normally be introduced until after there's no further amendments in the Westminster bill, which is usually after the House of Lords. So they are looking for royal assent by spring 2026. So we would be looking to introduce a bill shortly thereafter, or in and around the same period.
Okay, thank you. So I have a couple of indications from members. So I have Kelly and I have Melissa at this point in time. So go ahead, Lana Kelly, Liddell.
I know you were mentioning there about the timescale. So Westminster's intent, and we're hoping this will go through in spring 2026, but we might have a gap in processes between the two bills then actually being active. I know the intention was that the pensions dashboard would be operational autumn 2026. I'm just thinking, given the fact that we know that this is coming and we know that we're going to have our own legislation coming through, how much is the pensions networks speaking with yourselves about preparing in Northern Ireland to match up to this? I suppose they're aware of it because it's happening in Westminster anyway.
We work very closely with officials in the Department of Work and Pensions, so we have already discussed this. The measures that are required to be operational in line with the DWP are the measures that we're seeking legislative consent for. The fact that there's going to be a delay won't impact on pension schemes, or we hope that it won't impact as long as we get our executive bill through by the end of the mandate. The subordinate legislation following on from the pension schemes bill, the Westminster bill, they don't intend it to be operational until 27-28.
Oh, right, okay.
So the powers and the measures within the wider bill, we should hopefully have the powers in order to replicate that in Northern Ireland at the same time as it's operational in Department.
Because of that delay in coming forward, then it means we won't have any gaps at all.
That is what we hope, and that's what we intend.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Melissa, Anne-Marie?
Fáilte role for Rich, Hayley, agus Defern. You're both all very welcome again. Hayley, do you have an opinion, I would say, on why it is that the British government has brought forward this legislation?
We have brought forward the legislation to improve the pension system within the whole of the UK. It's for better reforms of the pension system to simplify. There's a whole range of measures in this bill, which we actually haven't properly assessed yet for Northern Ireland because we haven't on the policy development for Northern Ireland at the moment. So I wouldn't be in a position to talk about the bill as a whole. It would be these measures here that we have assessed at this point.
And if we didn't consent to this, what would be the implications?
Well, I could, taking it step by step, I mean, the terminal illness provision, we wouldn't have the extension of the 6 months for people who live in Northern Ireland for the PPF and the FAS. The pension ombudsman would mean we would have to rely on the court system for pension overpayments and rectifying those. For the Virgin Media, any defined benefit pension schemes would be likely, could result in challenge for any changes that have been made during the period where the reference theme test actuarial confirmation has not been provided. The pension dashboards, the people in Northern Ireland who would fall under the financial assistance scheme and the pension, the PPF, they wouldn't have their details on the pension dashboards like the rest of the UK. And then contractual override. We wouldn't have the ability, well, pension schemes in Northern Ireland wouldn't have the ability to move members from one scheme to another, and this would have knock-on effects to the value for money framework, which is in the bill, and also the consolidation of small pots. So we wouldn't have the ability to do any of those things, which an awful lot will be beneficial to the people in Northern Ireland.
Very disadvantageous to a lot of people.
It would be.
Yeah, Grandma.
Thank you, Melissa. Andy?
Yeah, Chair, just very quickly, paragraph 68 of your briefing document around human rights and equality states that the provisions of the bill are largely beneficial. Is there anything within the bill that the Department has identified that may not be beneficial, or would you feel it's entirely beneficial? Or the LCM, rather, sorry?
It is. It's more a case of that, yes, they're largely beneficial in that they're advantageous. I think the wording in that document is to make clear that it's kind of each of the measures, it's not necessarily advantageous to somebody, but it's also not going to disadvantage them. So that language in that document is just to make clear that some of the measures are absolutely advantageous, but some of them people won't actually notice if it's advantageous or not.
So you would probably change that largely beneficial to entirely beneficial? There's nothing within it that the department would see as not being beneficial?
No, well, there's nothing that we have assessed it, and we don't think that there's any disadvantages to anybody.
Yeah, no, it's just stuck out that there may have been a degree of ambiguity there in terms of largely beneficial and how I'm interpreting it, rather than being entirely beneficial. But if you're
we'll
confirming
take that
that
away, and we'll consider the wording around that.
Sorry, if I could just follow up on that, Andy. I think that term's in there because some of the measures are quite technical and make changes that re-establish elements that should have been there in the past, and they don't necessarily make a change that is either advantageous or not advantageous to individuals. It's more rectifiable rather than something that's going to impact the person on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's just the ambiguity of the term there to cover that.
No, just given my interpretation of the language, I just wanted to clarify that point, and appreciate you clarifying that. Thanks, Chair.
Andy? I suppose that sort of prompts me, and apologies if it was covered in the briefing, but just to clarify, when an LCM is being considered, do the like of yourself, do you have input at the very start of it to kind of iron out potential unforeseen consequences, or is it a question of just simply assessing it when it comes, what the impact might or might not be? Like, is that a co-produced kind of a position when an LCM is brought forward?
In normal processes, we work closely with the Department for Work and Pensions whenever new policies are being developed, and we liaise with them to get the information that we require to assess it from a Northern Ireland perspective.
Okay, thank you. I'll just check any other questions, members. Otherwise, I think we can thank Hayley and her team, and appreciate you bringing this further information to us, and we'll obviously be coming back in due course to look at that, but appreciate your input today, Hayley, and everyone else.
Thank you very
folks.
much.
Yep. Okay. Okay, members, just want to check there with you, is there any follow-up actions anyone wants to suggest, or happy enough to move on to the next item? Okay, so we're going to move on then to agenda item 11, and this is consideration of our end of session report. So members, you've been provided with a copy of the draft report at page 556. Do you have any comments on the draft report, or are people content that that is published? So I just had a few issues that I wanted to kind of, in terms of the section that deals with priorities, future priorities, and I think I think first of all there's a section around the social and poverty strategies. I think we should include language strategies there, and the issue of engagement with sectors within that's an important priority for the committee, that there's good engagement on any of these policies and strategies.
Chair,
go ahead, Kelly.
One of the points that was drawn out by, I think it was Daniel, or maybe it was Helping Hands, it was one of the responses that we've had this week, points out that consultation periods need to be longer whenever we're considering the deaf community. And we've obviously done quite a long committee consideration period, but there's something in there about that consultation. You know, we need to maybe ask, as part of our forward plan, what the department will be doing and what the civil service will be doing with regards to consultations moving forward in light of the sign language bill coming forward.
Yeah. Did we?
Will that added in to look at the duration of consultation periods?
Yeah, because it's highlighted, I think it must be Helping Hands paper, because they're quite practical with all of this, that a short consultation period does not help the deaf community in any way to take part because of the need for interpretation and transcription.
Want me to add those in?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
The other thing that I thought was a couple of areas that, and I know it's kind of difficult if you start to set out priorities, almost everything's such a priority, it becomes hard to know, but two of the things that I think we have taken particular attention to and tried to put a particular focus on, one of which is the arts sector. I think I would like to see that included as part of our priorities going forward. We want to ensure that there remains a focus on the needs of the arts sector, given the report that we've generated, and to ensure that do you want to say anything on that, Kelly? Or Sian, sorry?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry, Sian.
No, and it's just great to hear other people on the same page. I think the momentum that we have created from our direct focus on the arts sector has been felt. Like, it's been communicated to me that that there are organisations who have been working in this sector for decades who have never been as engaged in the work of the department and have never heard the arts talked about as much in a scrutiny committee. So it's really appreciated. So yeah, I would definitely see that being kept as a focus and a priority of this committee. I think it's really important.
Yep. And this is all within the context of likely key priority, and we will need to do for the plan around that. The final one for me is around the importance and the value and the benefit of sport, which obviously is a huge responsibility within the department. I think it's important, given how we started off the meeting around concerns with the funding for soccer, given casement has been a contingent. I think that sporting and indeed the grassroots soccer event in Belfast City Hall last week, which was really good and an uplifting event. Sport could offer so much, so I think it's going to remain a priority along with so many other things. But I think that'll be useful to reflect. Andy?
Just very quickly, and maybe it's not a single priority, but it's a priority that cuts right across. And it's back to that piece you said earlier on about the timely and effective communication of the department with us, which obviously has a bearing on everything that we do. If they're not engaging with us and leveraging this committee, then things may be communicated and we're not then able to engage with stakeholders in as meaningful a way as we would like to. So I think that should be included, but it cuts across everything that we do.
Agree, yeah. Agree. Pam, were you looking in?
No, Chair, other than maybe just to declare an interest of having a family member as a member of the Arts Council, newly appointed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Clark, are you content to make
I'll add into that page 577 then for the current session languages, engagement and co-production with the stakeholders, the arts sector maintaining a priority, looking at the consultation periods in the context of the Sign Language Bill, the importance and value of support in sports, and then the timeliness of the department's communication with the committee in relation to all of its work.
Yeah.
And just if I can add on the sport bit, the disability and underrepresented groups.
Okay.
Just a few things.
Yeah, and they're also important in their own right. Like, it is really a challenge for us and for the department, I'm sure.
I think it just shows just how much of a remit this department has, and just how important it is to people's lives, and that we get it right.
Yep. Okay, thank you, members. That's useful.
Chair, can I just come in there? This is not for the end of session report, but it's something I am a bit concerned about. The new standing order that was brought forward with the Executive Office is going to be given the update on the expected legislation for 25-26. There's a bit coming through from communities. We're going to be hit quite hard on this. I'm just wondering if we can get timescales from the department based on that statement of when they're talking about bringing this stuff forward.
Last.
Have you?
It's in the letter that went, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a real priority, Kelly. You are right in that. We do need to get that very, very quickly to make any kind of arrangements. So, yeah, major issue. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, members, therefore content. We'll get that redrafted and come back, and we can see sign off on that then. So, agenda item 12 then is addendums to retention and disposal schedules of councils. And members have been provided with copies of the addendums at page 583. Do you have any comments, or are you content to approve the addendums? Content, thank you. Agenda item 13 is prisoner ombudsman retention and disposal schedule. So, members, a memo from the Committee for Justice is at page 615. The Justice Committee had sought further information on how this schedule differs from the previous version. The response from the Ombudsman advised that the schedule was updated to bring their record keeping and GDPR compliance up to date with changes in GDPR and DPA in 2018, as well as to comply with PRONI's legislation. The committee, the Justice Committee that is, was therefore content with the schedule. So, do members have any comments or are content to approve the schedule?
Content.
Content, thank you, members. Agenda item 14, members, is the Forward Work Programme, a copy of which is at page 638. Just would like to, before we move to a close in the meeting, I'd like to highlight there's a committee event after our meeting on the 16th of October. This is a Sign Language Bill informal event with children in conjunction with the Assembly's Education Service. It will take place from 12:30 to 1:30 in room 135, and it will be good to have as many members as possible in attendance at that. And I'd also like to take that opportunity just to thank the members of the team here, clerk and all the other members, for the diligent work they're doing in ensuring that our consideration of this sign language bill is comprehensive, is widespread and is meaningful, and I think that's really useful to us as a committee. So any comments, or are members otherwise content to note the Forward Work Programme? Yep. Content. Agenda item 15, any other business? Do members of any other business they wish to raise? And in absence of that, then we're moving to agenda item 16, date, time and location of next meeting. Members, our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday 16th of October 2025 in room 25. I wish you all well. In the meantime, members, and our meeting is now adjourned.
29.
29.
25.
25.